Hey parents, when a former news anchor and news producer suggests that maybe we shouldn't watch the news, that's what the kids call a hot take. And we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about whether or not our kids should watch the news, and if they should consume news, how best to consume news, how do we help them navigate the news. Those are the things that we're going to talk about today. We did this topic a couple of years ago. We're going to come back to it again because there's obviously so much news going on. Our special guest is with us today. We'll introduce her in just a moment. Michael, welcome to the Wonder of Parenting podcast.
Thank you. And welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Since it's with Michael Green, it's always good to have you with us. We are brought to you, as always, by Army and Navy Academy. It isn't just a school. It is a transformational experience. As a Gurian Center for Excellence, they use neurobiological research to help boys reach their full potential. Through structured academics, leadership training, and strong mentorship, boys develop confidence and skills that last a lifetime. Without the distraction of personal digital devices during the academic day, they foster deep learning and meaningful connections. Located on the Pacific Ocean in Carlsbad, California, they prepare young men for success in college and beyond. You can learn more at armyandnavyacademy.org. armyandnavyacademy.org. Well, Michael and I are really excited to have Lynn Smith back with us today. Lynn was with us not too long ago, promoting her new book. And Lynn comes from the world of news. And we thought it would be really interesting to talk with her because so much obviously has been happening in our country, continues to happen. Lynn, the last time we had this conversation was with your friend Bill Weir and from CNN. And at that time, sort of the point of interest, the point of contact was a story I had heard on CNN just a couple days prior with a CNN reporter watching CNN News, and they were covering some of the salacious details about one of the Trump things before he was elected president, and his kid walked in. And so we said, okay, what happens? Now the story that we're all talking about is not too long ago, a week or two ago, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. To give perspective, and you had mentioned that both of your nephews had actually seen images of the shooting, and we're going to have Michael talk about what that does to kids here in a moment. Before we sort of talk about your take on news and how we help our kids navigate it, you come from a news background. Tell us a little bit what you think we need to know as parents about how the news is made and what we should sort of be aware of. I mean, these people are well-intentioned. That's not to say they aren't. But what are the things that go into a newscast, choosing stories, producing news, things that might be helpful for us just to know as background?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Thanks for having me back. It's a daily sort of swimming, keeping your head afloat. That's the best way that I kind of describe it. So our days in news start, depending on when your show is, very early in my case. So I was a morning show anchor. And so about 5 hours before the show, there's a meeting, an editorial meeting. It's like, what's happening? You know, looking at the wires, what's being talked about, what needs a guest, what doesn't need a guest. And I think what we're getting at here, and we should get straight to the headline, is the things that make you go, oh my gosh, is what end up on the news.
Right.
I hate to call it clickbait, but it's the things that make you go, oh, I got to keep watching. And much of what has become the news is, how can I get someone to not reach down for that remote and change the channel? So even if you're looking at the banners when you're watching the news, it's like, how do I keep it alert, 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 alert? And I don't think there's a malice there. I think that there is a intent to keep things feeling urgent and top of mind, and they can't control what's happening in the world. And sadly, there's a lot more that's devastating. Although I would argue maybe we have a spotlight on all the bad things that are happening because it's 24/7. Like terrible things have been happening since the beginning of time. And so I don't think it's ill-intended. I just think the effects of that reality are pretty devastating to definitely children. And I would argue to adults as well, because when you're stuck in that cycle of negativity, you begin to only live in that negativity. I mean, there's neuroscience behind that. Michael, I think you are the person to talk to about when you're constantly exposed to negativity, what that does to your brain. But I know that was one of the big reasons I got out of it. And I think it's a big warning to parents about how you approach the intake of news, both personally and for your kids.
Yeah. So before we have Michael comment on that, just to give a little context, you're far too young to remember this, but Michael and I grew up on Walter Cronkite. And, basically, Americans had access to 30 minutes of news a day.
Yes.
That was about it on 3 different networks. And now we can be bombarded with it, not
That's
just on TV 24/7, but through social media 24/7. So your point that you've got to find something to keep people watching is really different than it was simply reporting the news. Now it's almost like you have to generate the news to keep people watching the news. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. And, remember, there's so much time to fill. And so you need
Yes.
to keep those eyeballs on your screen for so much longer, to your point. And when I started in the business, so I started out of college in 2001, and I saw the progression of the decline. And I
Yeah.
really began around 2006, 2007, saw a little bit of the shift. It escalated after 2008. It really rapidly declined after 2016. And then I felt like it fell off a cliff after the pandemic.
Mhm.
And everyone within the news business is now feeling personal effects of consistently covering mass shootings,
Mm.
consistently covering political news and unrest on both sides. I mean, it is just an endless cycle. So when I started in journalism school, it was the 30-30 rule. You give 30 seconds to one candidate, you give 30 to the next. And what I
Right.
found as my career progressed, that purist journalist in me was getting stretched into lanes that are not a desired lane for me to live in. And again, another reason why I got out of the business in general, but it's going to probably not correct itself because the model still exists. The
Right.
need to fill those screens still will always exist. It's changing because everyone's getting their news on social media, which is a
Yeah.
whole nother conversation of the dangers of that. But in the current state, there's no taking the genie and putting it back in the bottle, it doesn't seem.
Right. And then one other question in this first segment where we're just kind of understanding how the news works. I don't think when we were growing up back in the 60s that there was a lot of talk about the bias of news.
No.
We just sort of felt like it was being presented to us. Although looking back, we know that editors make decisions and how they frame the headline has some bias to it. But now we're in a period where we can't tell the news from the people pontificating on the news, which has really muddied the waters where news isn't just news anymore. News is now opinion, and opinion is news, which I think adds to the growing anxiety. It's really hard to watch a story without somebody telling me what to think about it.
And the viewer is privy to it and keen to it, and they are choosing not to watch. And that's why ratings are really down. And I think that that's a wake-up call for news organizations, that that's not what viewers wanted. If they wanted that, they would go to an opinion. That's why we have an opinion column in newspapers.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think that the problem is going to self-correct itself, but it began again to erode when institutional managing editors started to get laid off. So newer, younger people came in, rules were loosened. And if you were of a certain angle or slant, depending on what network you were at, things would get through under the radar or over the radar, and it would be perfectly welcomed. Things that would never have ever been able to get approved. And one thing that's really important is that there are facts and then there are lies, and you can still tell the truth and not include all the facts, and the viewer's not getting the whole story and it's skewed a certain way. And that's where you kind of get under the radar or over the radar, so to speak, when it comes to presenting a story. It's not that you're presenting facts that are false. It's that you're not presenting all of the facts for context. And we're seeing a lot of this you brought up Charlie Kirk, and a lot of the sound bites that are being shown of things that he has said, when you take out the context and you put that back in, and social media has been doing a lot of that, regardless of where you stand on what his politics are, that's important. Context is really important when you are making a decision and making blanket statements and calling somebody a very, huge word that has a lot of meaning behind it. The context is important. And that's been lost a lot in journalism. And it's an unfortunate problem for the viewer, but they've taken that into their own hands and they're choosing to get their news in other places.
Yeah. We're with Lynn Smith, and just really such interesting stuff, but it's not a podcast about the news. I could go on for quite a while on this. So we do want to shift it now. We've kind of got context. So we're going to come back and we're going to talk to Michael a little bit about the impact of this stuff on the brain, especially for kids, and more about, we'll get to Lynn and why she's saying maybe we shouldn't be consuming as much news as we might be. You're listening to Wonder Parenting Podcast, a brain science approach to parenting. We'll be back with you in just a moment. Michael, when we were having a little bit of email back and forth with Lynn, I said that for myself, I was having to get off the news because it was just, I was constantly in a state of agitation.
Yeah.
I haven't weaned myself quite as much as I want to, but I have weaned myself off of the social media, which sort of adds to the agitation. What Lynn was talking about, sort of the sensationalized headlines, this is my language, not hers, even sometimes to the point of outrage to keep your eyeballs on the screen. What does it do to our brains or amygdalas, all that stuff? So talk generally and then take it down to what it's doing to our kids.
Okay, that's a small topic. Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of the most important topics really humanity is facing right now.
That's right.
So we're getting there are a number of elements. One is it's coming in as trauma. So agitation, we should expect agitation and depression, from adults and children. We're seeing an uptick of it. And of course, we're going to keep having an uptick of it the more that people are connected to their devices and taking in news either via legacy or YouTube and social media. The frequency of the intake, right? The frequency of the intake can increase the trauma. The images can increase the trauma, like you were talking about with the images of someone getting shot in an 8-year-old. I don't know how old your nephews are, but 5, 8, 12, year old seeing, yep. They're 12. Okay. So seeing that, and then of course, then it's rumination loop. So they're just running it over in their minds. So so in terms of the brain parts, the amygdala obviously is where agitation is going to start. It's where this heavy emotionality is going to start, and it swells up and these signals go through. And, that's where the trauma is sort of occurring, but then it gets looped through other parts of the brain. It tries to go up to the, frontal lobe. We talk a lot about that's where maturity is, the frontal lobe. It tries to go up there. It goes up there. Maybe the frontal lobe has some slight reaction to it, but the signaling is going to go back to the trauma centers, the agitation centers. And gradually, we're going to have depression. We should just sort of expect it. And we are seeing constant increase in depression among our kids, boys, girls, everybody. And that's and adults, men and women. And that is it. Like, until we get people to get off of social media, until we get people to set some kind of ritual, like I'm going to watch the news for 15 minutes a day. That's it. Or let's give it a half hour. I'm going to watch NBC News or whatever. I picked that out of my head. That's a half hour of that a day. That's what I'm going to watch. And I know it's not absolutely the news. I know it's set up for, clickbait and all that, but that's what I'm going to watch. And then that's it. Okay. Until we get there, then we're just going to have a constant increase of anxiety and depression in our population. The younger we go, the more that the trauma affects, and we can have an actual sort of trauma response. Like, for instance, one of the things that is an indicator of later violence, that someone will become violent later in life, is if they see violence done very close to them. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, it's one of the ACEs, adverse childhood experience. If the child sees a parent hitting the other parent, okay, so they're more likely to become violent later in life because they've witnessed that up close. What's coming through the screens, coming through social media and TV, and YouTube, what's coming through, one act isn't going to do it, to that brain, like it could do it if you see your father kill your mother. Okay, that's enough, just that right there. Okay, so seeing it done on a screen, okay, it's not like that. But when you add them up and you get thousands and then hundreds of thousands, that can start increasing your likelihood later in life to at least not be able to control your impulses, because you do get desensitized. And so then we get the link to increased violence and those sorts of things. And increased violence is directly connected to depression. It's directly connected to anxiety. So it creates a sort of perfect storm. So we are, by having our kids get addicted to this stuff, and by giving them screens, smartphones at 10 or 8 or 12 even, by giving them that, they, of course, it's attractive. Like Lynn said, it's so attractive to the brain to watch violence, right? The brain gets a dopamine hit off of that, and it's unfortunate, but that's how the brain is set up. So if we allow our kids to be seeing this for hours and hours a day, we'll see an increase on everything else that comes: addiction, triggered addiction biology, depression, anxiety, violence, ADD, ADHD. I mean, we'll just keep seeing an increase of all these brain disorders.
Yeah.
So, Lynn, we just heard kind of a horror story from Michael.
Yeah, it's actually so important, because it's like, you can't ignore this. If you're a parent right now, you cannot ignore it.
So to my point then, Lynn, I think all of us who love our country, who love our cities, towns, villages, we feel this need to stay informed. We want to know what's going on. We want to be good citizens. The news is the way that we derive our information. So how do we navigate all of that? How do we stay informed without going bonkers?
Well, let's start with us as adults, and then we'll talk about kids. So as adults, I stopped watching the news. And I know that's a big, bold statement. As a journalist, I find the visual medium of the news, there's so many added layers to just the foundation, which is the information. Like, it needs to look great. There needs to be compelling images. The hosts need to look the part. I was put behind glass desks so that my legs could be seen. Like, all of those superficial things are the reality of a visual medium. The information that's being shared on the news is actually probably the last source that you should be getting, because the urgent information is going online first. So I find, if you want to be an informed citizen, decide on a number of trusted sources, and I call it reading in. And you read in each morning, and maybe a little bit in the afternoon as you close out the day. I would probably, myself personally, it's more of a morning. And throughout the day, if something terrible happens, it's popping up on my feed or on my phone. And do I need to know every single horrible thing happening in the world? No. But do I need to understand current events and what is being shaped and policies that are happening and all of that? Sure. Trusted sources. And that's for you as the viewer, and me as the viewer, to decide what is it that we find trusted. And then I like the practice of going to see what it's being said on the left and what's being said on the right. Because I think it's really important for us as Americans to have a thoughtful conversation with the understanding of what those that you disagree with are coming from. That's healthy. Like, everybody agreeing is unhealthy, but you understanding the point of view of someone you disagree with, super duper healthy. So that's my strategy and how I approach it. When it comes to my kids, hard and fast, I think there is zero value in news for children. And I'm talking 18 and younger. And I would argue, like, anyone in their 20s, like, the frontal lobe is not even developed for boys until 25. I find zero value in it. And this is coming from every single night we sat as a family and watched Tom Brokaw every night. And so I was raised in a home of news, but there is zero value to what that is going to do to your children by watching the news. It's not anything they need to know right now. There are thoughtful conversations that can happen around the dinner table as to what's happening in politics. And that's for the parents really to decide, and how they want to navigate the information and the floodgates that their kids have access to. But I see absolutely no value to it. And then that leaves us with what? Social media, which they have access to. And even though we put protections on it, what are we going to do? It happened, as you pointed out, to my nephews. They had Instagram, which we could have a whole nother debate, right? I'm not going to do social media until 15, which I know everyone's going to say. And I would say maybe 16. I don't know the answer to that, but it's for this very reason. This Charlie Kirk shooting popped up on their algorithm the same way it did for me. Unintentionally, we had no idea it was coming, a simple swipe, and all of a sudden you watch an assassination unedited. I mean, it's unbelievable that Instagram will censor a breastfeeding mother, but
Yes.
that ends up in an algorithm.
Yeah.
It's infuriating to me as a mother. And then as a human, it's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
I wish there was a version of an algorithm in which you can filter and categories of things. You can say, I only want to see food content. Don't decide the algorithm for me. I just want to see food content. I just want to see fashion. I just want to see sports, whatever it is. But there's a lot of layers there. And us as citizens and as parents have the role of being the gatekeeper. And instead, right now, these big media companies, I feel like, have infiltrated and have decided that they're going to just get into our families in any way, which way they can.
Yeah. We're going to come back. I want to tease that out because, I mean, what you said there is pretty significant and strong, right? So we're here with Lynn Smith. We're talking about news and our kids consuming news, us consuming news, the Wonder of Parenting podcast, a brain science approach to parenting. Back with you in just a moment. Lynn, when Michael and I were little, in our schools, every week we got a thing called My Weekly Reader. And it was a little summary of the news written for kids. Now, it was a life, again, where, we had Walter Cronkite for 30 minutes. That was it. We weren't really talking about the views on the news so much. It was just, here's some big stories, usually had to do with kids. I have a vivid memory. I think I was in 5th grade. And the article was on what will life be like in the year 2000. And I can remember calculating, how old am I going to be in the year 2000? Will I live long enough to get to the year 2000? This was 1960 something. Now, can I get to 2050? Can I get another 25 years in? But I felt like that seemed to be helpful. I mean, it was curated for kids. It was safe. So it did keep us somewhat up with life in the world. So talk about that in terms of what you just said. You see no value in news at all for kids.
Right. And I think that would be, if in my utopia, that there were a managing editor somewhere that was doing something that put together all of the news stories in a format that would be beneficial for children. Mm-hmm. In my utopia that exists, and that would be an easy thing to create. What we found is on both sides of the spectrum that there is a desire to position a story through the lens of whatever intended viewpoint that you want. And this is happening on both sides of the spectrum. Yep. And it's very hard for people to separate what part of the spectrum is opinion and what part is fact, because many people who are hard and fast liberals or conservatives are like, this isn't a matter of truth or false. This is a matter of, this is the way it is. And it's like, well, actually, no, this is the opinion of your political party. So I don't know that there are people in the news business at this stage that are able to present it in a truly unbiased way. I'd love to see somebody do it, but I guarantee if they did, we would look at it and it would either be skewed left or right in some way, shape, or form. It would have the underpinning of that. Even in the best of intention, we're seeing that in many different ways of how messages are being sent to children. And there's a real, rabbit hole I can go down about how do you change a country? Mm-hmm. You change a country by changing children's views on a country and what they think is acceptable in a country. And so I think over time, our children have been targeted to view things in the way that benefits either political party in order to change the country in the way that either party wants it to go. Yeah. And I feel strongly about that it doesn't serve our kids. They need to be kids. Yeah. They need to learn about American history. They need to learn about what their parents value and what they want in the home to be the true foundation of the family. And it's just not something that I, as a mom, feel like I can outsource. I'd rather be the gatekeeper because I just don't think anyone's doing it responsibly.
Even in today's world, talking about American history is now a left and right proposition. So this may be me. I watch a lot of BBC News because I feel like what they're doing is they're just giving me news.
Yes.
And then they'll tell me when they're giving me opinion. Where what you seem to describe, and we talked about earlier, in the United States of America, we've lost the ability, except for maybe when CNN, I don't watch headline news. Maybe it's close to that. I don't know. So I haven't seen it for a while.
Headline news, CNN headline news actually doesn't exist anymore. HLN was shuttered as a news organization.
See, that tells you how long it's been.
That's right. And, for a long time, HLN just had the wheel. It was just 30 minutes of headlines. And that keeps things really monitored as far as how deep you can go, right? The headlines just tell you what's happening in the world. It doesn't analyze it. Where you start to get a little slippery slope is like, let's bring in so-and-so to talk about these headlines. And the anchor is not saying this is truth, but the guest is. And there are a lot of news organizations that feel strongly about having guests on both sides, but it's not always accomplished. And so one side, depending on which network that you're watching on, gets a little bit more airtime. And slowly over time, what happens? The two sides get further and further apart. And what are we seeing in this country? We're more divided than times, obviously, I've seen in my generation. And I'd leave it to you in your generation. I mean, I can't think of any other time in which we have been this divided. And somebody posted on September 12th of 2001 would be so disappointed in September 12th of 2025.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Wow.
And I thought, that's pretty spot on because we were all so united that September 12th. And when you looked at the algorithm on September 12th this year, you kind of questioned humanity.
Yeah. So Michael, just as we kind of wrap up, I think this is kind of the challenge we're talking about with news. When news is skewed to one side or the other, it's going to naturally create agitation in us almost instantly, depending on what our viewpoint is.
Yeah.
Which then is going to bleed down. If I'm watching news and I'm agitated, my kid's going to be agitated even if they're not watching the news.
Right. Yeah.
So go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yep. I was going to say
you had asked. Yeah.
The Gurian brain tells us what?
Well, I like this concept of the utopia. Lynn saying, "Okay, in my utopia, in my utopia for our children around these issues, what I would love to see is for the parents to be curating, setting up maybe through family dinner table conversation, debates over current events, which we did when we were kids." Curating and ritualizing how they get their news. So, ritualizing a half hour a day. If they're very little, obviously they're not going to watch it because Lynn's right. Also, right. It's the watching, seeing the violence, right? So it can be curated to be kind of verbal. Like here's kind of the news. Let's say we're dealing with 10-year-olds. They're 10 and 9 at my dinner table. Here's sort of the news. I'm the parents. I'm curating it. It's not going to be politicized. It's just going to be, here's some things that happen. There was someone who is very important got killed. In the same way that when we were growing up, we were told first that Martin Luther King got killed. Then we saw it, right?
Yes.
Or artificial intelligence is gaining, and here's what artificial intelligence is. Whatever it is, half an hour, curate it, give the kids the news so they get it, so they're not out of it, so they get it. Protect them from the visual and the constancy of the visual. No social media, so they're just getting it curated, and it's brought into the values of the family.
Yes.
Because the family, a lot of what the family's trying to do is to teach values, and that's one of our primary jobs, values and resilience. So we can teach our values by curating the news and giving them what the news is, and then we can help them with responses. Well, here are the values in our family. So I would like to see the news kind of be used, curated, and used to help teach value. and values development, moral development, etc., which is what kids need. And that is actually going to increase their resilience because, of course, we're decreasing their resilience by bombarding them with all of this. It's trauma. We're decreasing their resilience. If we curate it, then we're not going to get the attack on resilience that we're getting in their brain development now, because we won't expose them to all of that. But they can still have values and have a response and think about things. And so when they go to school and people are talking about it, they can still talk about it. They can still talk about, yeah, this happened and this happened. And then they can gain more knowledge from others. That would be my utopia. That would protect them from social media. That would protect them from too much of the visual news, as Lynn's saying. And it would keep them in the discussion of values and value development.
Yeah. And I would also add that, us as parents, if we can teach our children that, yes, these are our values, and it might not be somebody else's values, and that's okay, that we can embrace that people are going to have different opinions than us. And actually that can lead to really interesting conversations and really thoughtful development. And you might evolve your values around this. And as long as it's steered in goodness and kindness and ethics, then we will accept, like, all of those things that we've just seemed to have lost because we've decided if the other side isn't aligned with us, they're horrible, terrible people. We want nothing to do with them. They need to fall off into the ocean.
Right.
And the journalists that are delivering a lot of the news, and many of them are my really good friends, so I don't mean this in a blanket way, but there are so many that have this opinion that, like, they are responsible to deliver this information. And it's almost sort of this higher than thou being. And you'll go on social media when big news stories happen. And if you'll notice, and you follow me on social media, I tend to not comment on current events. And that's very intentional because I have the viewpoint of, like, nobody needs to hear from me. Like, nobody cares what my opinion is. Like, they should care about what do they value. Nobody needs me to come on and say, you know what, it's okay to take a break from social media in a hard time. Like, so I don't go there, but I see a lot of journalists telling us what we should be seeing, thinking, and doing. And just as a viewer, are we aware of that and self-aware that somebody else is thinking and feeling that they should be delivering this information to you, and that's it, and that's all the information that you need? And it's like, no, actually, you are a citizen of this world and country and human, that you go out and you gather all the information that you want, and then you make your informed decision.
Right. Lynn, this has been so rich, really, and we'll have you back again sometime because you're just fantastic.
You need to write a book on this.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Speaking of book, you the last time you were with us, you were promoting a book which I think speaks really well to what we're talking about here.
Yes.
And this is about how to calm ourselves, how to calm our kids. So just tell us again about the book. And I guess we sort of talked about a brain bully today. I guess news could be a brain bully.
Sure. Yeah.
So talk about, just tell us about the name of the book and where families can get it.
Well, thank you. It's called Just Keep Going. It actually just came out September 30th. It's a sweet little mouse. The intention was, how do we raise the next generation of resilient leaders? I work with executives and coach them into being great communicators. And I realize their fears, like if I say the wrong thing, their brain bully, as you mentioned, Tim, which our previous episode dug into, is actually what holds them back. So if we could earlier on as parents nurture this idea of, when you push through your fears, when you take deep breaths through things that scare you, when you choose to be brave, that you eventually get to your destination, and your no's and your disappointments are all just building blocks to where you're eventually going to get, that we can embrace those ideas. And so we drilled it down into a message of little mouse that goes through the forest and meets friends that remind him to just keep going. And so as you're listening to this, and there has been a lot of sort of negative connotation to news and all those things that might get you down, let me leave you with some light. And the light being that all of us have that resilient just power within us to push through what's hard. And we are in one of those hard times. And just, I welcome you into this Just Keep Going movement, where we put one foot in front of the other, that we take and embrace the positive things in our life, and we surround ourselves with that positivity and that energy. Because as Michael so appropriately talked about, if you are only exposing your brain to the negative, you will be sucking yourself down into this lower place that you just don't want to be.
Lynn, thank you so very, very much for joining us. It has been fantastic as always to have you here. Michael, Great insights as always.
Always.
Thank you all for
Thank you,
listening.
Lynn.
I hope you'll share this with your friends. This is good stuff. And we'll be back with you next time. The Wonder Parenting Podcast, the Brain Science Approach to Parenting. I'm Tim Wright along with Dr. Michael Green. We'll be with you next time.